Good. Perfect. All right.
So, Paul, how can abdominal training influence athletic performance?
I mean, biomechanically, the first thing as a posturologist, as we know, the abdominals, it's part of the core, but that makes the cylinder. And in most people, they have too much anteversion, meaning that a lot of people, because they sit down too much or there's an abundance of valgus feet or flat feet, most people, they have too much lumbar curvature. And taking that in consideration, when you're going to move, we're going to use abdominal training, most of the conventional in the old days and still today, still people do a lot of sit-ups, even with their feet hook. And that stimulates a lot more the subumbilical part, meaning anything on top. See, to just make it clear, lower and upper ab don't really exist biomechanically, but if you have a surface EMG or an MRI, if I flex the trunk on my pelvis, that's one of the main function of the rectus abdominis, then it's going to be more red here. It's going to get pink. And if I stabilize well, I'll have a bit of lighter pink, even white. But in sports activity, unless you throw a lot of movement, and it's kind of rare that you have these lines, if you see a lot of more, it's called a positive torsion, meaning a mixture of flexion and rotation that happens, then you will have more of the obliques involved. But the subumbilical is the one that's below the abs, and that's the one that makes flex the pelvis on the trunk. And that's most activities when you run, when you jump, when you skate, has to be active, not only in movement, but also in stability. And to do so, you need to be aware of it. Most people, when they lie on their back and we put them in these positions, they can't even lift their pelvis up. They're like, everything moves. I'll ask them to do this, oh, the upper body. They don't have a control over the subumbilical. And that's
So, Paul,
crucial.
if somebody doesn't have control of the subumbilical, what do you do? Do you start with a certain testing protocol? Do you have to pass a certain level before you can go on to the more advanced exercises?
Actually, the exercise I just showed you, I made the person lie down, the head is down on the floor. You want to use what we call a stable platform. Now you want to make sure you put your hand close to the pelvis and the hand on top of the knee, and they need to lift their hip, their pelvis off the floor. There's no normal. There's no, you just need to clear the floor a bit, hold it for about 5 seconds, and go back down. And that gives you, first of all, it's a great exercise to re-engram, but also it's a testing. What I found with gymnasts, people I had the chance to work with people from the Cirque du Soleil in Montreal. A lot of these athletes that they have a good body awareness or awareness of their pelvis, they could lift very, very high. Same as a lot of figure skaters, they're able to use, they have a good body, mind body connection on how to use their subumbilical to stabilize their pelvis as they skate, as they jump, or as they climb rope. But again, that test, and I use that old Kendall and Kendall test that you place your hand on their L3 and you have the person lower their legs until the fingers leave, or I use a blood pressure cuff, and that's more precise. I inflate it to 40, and then I put it right under L3, right behind the belly button, and the athlete, the person presses, has to keep the same pressure. Let's say as they press the lumbar spine at L3 on the little blood pressure cuff. Then as they lower the legs, as soon as the pressure diminish, then you stop and you could take a picture. It gives you feedback. And then to re-engram the movement, you could do the same exercise, lowering one leg, bent knee. Just use gravity to changing your center of mass and your lever arm by shortening the lever. If you bend your knees, it's going to be easier. And that's the test becomes an exercise. And what we found is that when you see that, let's say they do hanging leg raise or with gymnasts that they need to do throwing their legs a lot, or divers that they need to do that pike, they always tell me they're quicker and they have a better harmony. And also for a hockey player or any sport that there's a lot of lateral movement, seems to have, what we notice over the last 41 years now, less prone to groin injury, the stronger the subumbilical and the more control. Because some athletes are so good that they're going to lift only one part of it, twisting it, they could do whatever they want. And I've seen significant uh, interaction in between running movement and also skating and jumping ability, and also less strain in the groin, but also there's a lot of oblique tear. There's a lot of abdominal tear, especially in hockey players, basically at the pillar of the external oblique, if you want to be too precise. And that because of that kind of skating, but strengthening that area, not only with the rectus, with legs crossed, with different angles to get internal oblique, external oblique in that lying down position. That helps a lot to reinforce that, but also aesthetically, that's where my athletes likes it. It's really, really good to build the bottom part. Although we know that abdominal definition, it goes with diet, but you might be surprised that when you never built those, you never had those, there is a better reflection when you have a shirt off, that you will see more of that lower part that's more developed and more harmonious. And also another factor as a posturologist that's very important is that the stronger and the more control you have over your rectus abdominis, subumbilical, internal oblique, and external oblique, the better your pelvis will move, your stomach will be flatter, and also your lumbar curvature will have a better control. You will not diminish that much the curve, but you will have a better control when you, like we call it, what they call it, the butt wink, when people squat, going from extension, there are less shearing force, especially in the squat, hitting 90 degrees. What we found is correlated to very good strength awareness of the subumbilical, internal oblique, external oblique, and also rectus abdominis.
Is there a certain sequence in your training for working each of these abdominal muscles? For example, do you work the subumbilical first, then the upper abs, and then the obliques? How do you design a training program to affect all the abdominal muscles?
But usually I will start with the easiest one, with the two knees, like I just showed, more for the rectus abdominis, from the subumbilical in a lying position on a stable floor. And very, very important to have like a stable platform that you will have a feedback of where you're pushing. And I like to start with isometric, like 5 to 10 seconds of hold and then go back down, exhaling fully. When you use your breath to create contraction, especially in analytical segmental reinforcement, it's completely the difference if I use a power. If I throw a medicine ball, I'm going to hold my breath, and then as I throw it, I'm going to keep that pressure until I release. But this is a movement. When I'm talking about reinforcement, segmental analytical reinforcement, I need to remove the Valsalva maneuver. I have to exhale fully as I do the movement to create more contraction on the muscle I want. You're weaker as you do it, but you're going to work stronger. Then your tension on the muscle increases. That's why we'll use like certain type of balloon. When someone will exhale, it will create a very deep contraction, not only with the rectus, but in combination with the diaphragm and the transversus abdominis. This is a great tool to work. Or there's different type of, like the relaxator. It's a little piece from Sweden. You just use the device. It's only exhaling. It creates airflow resistance. When it's not made to inhale like the power breath or other, this is only exhalation. I like it because I like people to inhale through the nose. Then if you use the device, either a balloon or this, because this is, I like it because there is a tension you could play with, then you will create a very deep contraction because of air compression. It's called airflow. That's the new program I have, airflow restriction. When you combine
Okay,
both,
Paul.
yep.
Yeah, I was so Paul, what about the current emphasis now on training the hip flexors in track and field? A lot of athletic fitness training programs, they're doing these types of what a lot of people call gar hammer type raises that working the hip flexors with like cable resistance. What do you think about those? Don't the hip flexors get enough work just from athletic training, playing the sports?
Yes and no. If you, at the beginning, I like to combine it with a bit of abdominals, but again, it goes with the pelvis. If you have too much anterior pelvic tilt, like a lot of people do, you have to be careful of working the hip flexor in a very short range. But you could work it in a more external range, like it's going to help with the fascia. There's nothing wrong, but as long as your sub-umbilical are at par. If you have too much lower lumbar curvature and you're going to start to work a lot in dynamic or with resistance on the hip flexor, you may end up to create more antiversion and a bit more lesion. It's all a muscle balance. But we always did for you. I mean, I've been working with figure skaters, divers, and gymnasts. They work their hip flexors all the time. Obviously, in certain instances, we need to work on certain movement. I like more a technique like Dr. Guy showed us. It's more derotation of the psoas. If you go to old videos of Swiss, I have Ken Kinakin on the table I'm doing a test on him to see when he brings his knee to his chest, does his foot come in or out? It means when you do this lying down, there is a rotation at the ilia fascia, iliopsoas fascia, fascia iliaca. Then you want to create a derotation with certain drills. That's going to help prior to work the hip flexor. Also, we have different drills with the athletes of sitting on the box, implementing different type of movement with rotation. It will still work your hip flexor, but in a rotational and has more transfer to pelvis stability. My goal when I work with an athlete is to improve, first of all, his posture, but with the foot, but second part or even the first part is his pelvis. There's 22 axes on the pelvis and you need to maneuver them. If you manage them, you could do pretty much whatever you want. As you know, Kim, you've been a strength coach for years. Everything is good, but you need to apply it to the body you're using. It's not like a one size fits all, like one sprinter had good results with it, but we don't have a 20-year downline what happened to him later, or another one could do the same thing with adverse effect. If you understand proper biomechanics of the pelvis, using in sequence, making sure that they have proper awareness in movement, then when you're going to do dynamic movement, you will see a big difference in your athletes' move. They're going to increase their range. I've done it with certain sprinters. Even my hockey players feel like when they're subumbilical or more strong and they're more aware of it, their stride becomes a lot longer and quicker. They cover more room on the ice. They've seen that, and also less stress on the groin.
Well, what about in the military and physical education classes, particularly in the U.S., sit-ups and leg raises? Are they
Again,
generally
depending
bad
if you do a sit-up with your feet flat on the floor and no one helps, it's pretty good. I mean, there's nothing there, but you're going to target more subumbilical that a lot of activity in life are targeting. Nothing wrong if you're going to play golf, or I used to be a wrestler. We used to do a lot of these movement with weights, even with a Swiss ball. Nothing wrong to go, but to go back, you need to go back to the basis. And like when I work with a hockey player, I have maybe 10, 12 weeks before camp. I need to go right down to the real gritty part of training and balancing out that area that's very vulnerable. Same for aesthetic. I used to work with physique athletes, female, and because they used to have high heels and some were ex-gymnasts. If you remember fitness competition many years ago were attracting gymnasts because of the acrobatic they had to do. But most gymnasts, as you know, that you work with, they have a lot of lumbar curvature because of all these leg raise and movement, and they're all like arch, and they suffer from a lot of back compression and shearing force as they age, all that tumbling on that curve. And that's why leg raise are okay if you control. I have circus people that they could do with a weight leg raise up and down without any movement on L3. Same thing with sit-ups, but you need to it's very complex abdominal training. It's not only what it looks like. And to have a good body awareness and to have a transfer to aesthetic, but also performance, a good balance, then you need to understand a bit of the science, the real biomechanic of it. Then when you master that, then you're able to mix it with like the carries and stuff like this. They're all good, these things that's really good to do one arm carry, farmer's walk, but it will not work the abdominals alone. Like a hanging leg raise, you're hanging from your lats. That's attached to your pelvis. Then you're going to create more curvature, and it won't be a pure, you won't know if your subumbilical or your mechanic of your pelvis got better. I've seen athletes over years when they start from the floor, incline bench, then standing, they're able to really control each segment. And you've seen them, they do the flagpole. Those people rarely suffer from any type of groin or lower back, but that's years and years and years of doing calisthenics or gymnastic. The goal of the webinar on the on the 7th is just to teach the basic and how to change in the brain the activation and how to use it to help. Then in the course that the Beyond Planks we're doing together, we're going to go way more in advance with all the barbell rollout that I'm surprised it got lost in translation. There's a lot of stuff you could just do with a barbell, but you need, as you know it, even when we filmed for the article, it was even with high level athletes, it was really hard to find athletes that they're able to stabilize their pelvis when they move. You saw it. They tend to arch. They tend to stick out their bum. Their head goes down. I always do a test, Kim, with my athletes. A single push-up gives you a lot of feedback on the body awareness of the body, because of especially the pelvis. A lot of guys, even they bench 500 pounds, they'll do a push-up, they'll drop their hips. The head goes down, the one shoulders, and that's for an athlete very detrimental when you play, especially impact sport like hockey, rugby, or even American football, because you're not lying down on the bench.
Some coaches believe that if you just do heavy squats, heavy deadlifts, or even Olympic lifts, that you don't need to do any additional abdominal work. And if you look at the ab development of some of these athletes, it's pretty tremendous. Are they kind of misguided?
It's not misguided. Again, I always like these articles because I'm very fortunate. I have some athletes that I've been following for more than 20 years. And with the backlog of 41-year experience, there's always exceptions. But a lot of strength coaches don't talk about their failures. And what we found, a bit like you have to walk before you run, doesn't mean to spend 20 weeks a year doing these exercises, but someone that's well coached within 2-3 weeks will really master, and they will, what became a training session inside, like say for a weightlifter, like I did with Francis when I rehab him for his lower back and knees. He did a lot of that, but after a couple of weeks, he did it as a warm up a bit once in a while. It took him like minutes a week. When he built that awareness, he saw the big difference. Was he more abdominally developed? I don't know, but he was a lot more functional, and his level of pain was lower. And also when he did, especially the snatch or anything overhead, we saw he had a better harmony in movement. And he told me, and we saw it on video. Then segmentally reinforcing, again, not spending years on it, will have a benefit of increasing. It's almost like a back singers for a singer in Vegas. yes, that person has a great voice. It could sing by itself, but after a while, the voice, the vocal cords will get overused if you don't work your diaphragm. The backup singers will help them to reduce the tension on the voice. Again, as an Olympic weightlifter, you should not feel your abs when you do that. That's you're doing a movement. But then you have, by developing them in another way, increasing the load, increasing the speed of contraction, even over speed contraction of what Olympic lifting demands. This is what we do. Then the movement becomes better. Then the athlete lifts higher and he wins medal. And that's what I'm paid for. Not really paid for what they look like. But on the other hand, what my athletes found is that within 2-3 weeks, they say, listen, coach, because I'm always been known for my six pack, even if I'm 62. They say, wow, I'm starting to see my intercostal. I'm starting to see muscle I never had. Why? They never work. They always work like suitcase walk or frontal plane or sagittal plane movement, or very heavy swinging of like in the old days with the ball and the landmine. Those are all great, but it's not pure abdominals. It is movement. Using analytical segmental reinforcement will help to have a better awareness and a better strength, and then you'll be able to move more. I guarantee you, within a couple of weeks on the landmine, you'll feel, wow, now I'm without feeling the
Well,
abs. You'll move that thing very fast.
well, what about rotational strength? Is a landmine a favorite exercise of yours? Do you like medicine balls? And you've also
Well,
discussed the concept of counter rotation.
well, again, what you found, and I found the same thing, Kim. When we're able to increase frontal plane awareness and strength, there's a direct transfer. Like we'll do like the old Saxon, remember Saxon bent or side bent. Those are great exercises. Remember in the old days with the dumbbell and doing, I use it with my athletes with my flywheel device in the sagittal plane, in a kneeling position or standing. Big, big transfer into rotation. I always found first, if your foundation is strong, if you're standing up, obviously your feet, but if your frontal plane is really, really strong, when you're going to rotate, you'll have a fixed axis. You will not deviate because I did judo and wrestling. When we did projection, if I'm able to keep it very central and move quick, then it's really my frontal plane that will stabilize me into that rotation. Then if I do rotational movement, but I'm all over the place, I'm moving in the sagittal plane and the frontal plane, I'm not using that coil effect. And again, in wrestling and judo and any sport, in baseball and hockey, the rotation is quick. It's not like a long, slow movement. That's why a lot of these landmines are okay, but they're very slow. Medicine ball could be very beneficial after you develop, but the plane is very short. I mean, the movement is really, really quick, and the level of movement, you can't throw it too high or too low, or you're limited by the range. But I like them. I will do them a lot in contrast with the medicine
What
ball
about
to create that speed.
what about sets and reps? I mean, you hear a lot of bodybuilders doing 200, 300, 400 repetitions on abdominal exercises to bring out the definition, their abs and such. What can you tell us about the kind of loading parameters for training the abdominals?
Pretty much the same. I like to work with time under tension, Ken. Especially, again, I like to start with isometrics in different position. I go from sets in between 6 and 20 seconds. The higher the level, the tension, obviously I'm going to reduce in time. But as an awareness, I will do sets of about 10 to 15 seconds of different holds in different position. Then when I'll do dynamic, I like to work on a timer. I will work around 30 to 45 seconds of time under tension when it's to build the awareness, and more kind of a hypertrophy, more for volume. As the athletes become better, I want to, before he starts into dynamic movement, I'm going to lower the rep range. I have athletes doing only 6 reps on these sub-umbilical, but we have like a 60, 70 pound dumbbell on it. And we will do that in that position. And then when we're going to stand up, because it's not pure anymore, we'll use the same parameters as we will use for other muscles. Again, I like time under tension. Obviously, when you contract your pelvis, the range of motion is very small. The number of reps will be a lot higher during that time under tension than if you do a line mine. You'll do like 6 reps while you're doing 1 because your range. But for me, it's always time under tension. And I like to work with a metronome. A metronome, especially when you do analytical segmental reinforcement, really forces you to go on the exhalation and inhalation all the time with the rhythm without counting. And you put the timer on and it beeps, like beep 1, beep, beep, beep as you go up and down. That's really interesting to build a very, very good awareness between a connection in between, especially when we're talking about muscle that we don't have a lot of connection, like the sub-umbilicals.
Finally, how much time should an athlete spend with abdominal training? It's like 10 minutes at the end of a workout enough? What are your general guidelines?
Well, like if I take a hockey player that comes back in May, obviously the first month he was going to do a little longer session. We'll do more segmental training sessions. It may last up to about 20 minutes to 30 minutes, a good core with lower back, with the obliques, with all different movement. I had up to 30 minutes, but as we progress in the periodization in the summer, as we start to lift heavier and faster movement and we start to go on the ice, it becomes a little shorter. Also, an athlete that's very effective in these methods will not need that much. The more what you'll find with athletes, even regular people, if you have a good awareness of your muscle contraction, because it's all about tension, especially the abdominals, if your breathing is right, you won't need that much. Within 10, 12 reps, you're going to start to, you'll be finished. Someone that doesn't have a good awareness may need up to a minute of movement before they really register what's going on. It's very, very individual. Again, these toys like the balloon, these airflow restriction device will help to create more intra-abdominal pressure and also body awareness, mind abdominal connection, way more.
Yeah. Generally, many commercial gyms will have half dozen or more abdominal machines, crunch type machines, rotational torso machines. What's your general opinion of those machines? Better than nothing, or can they contribute to long-term problems?
Yeah, you will, a bit like remember the even old ab roller, they invented that because women were complaining they have neck pain. And they sold, I think, 14 million. But anyway, it's better than nothing, but you lose really what you're using. You're using a lot. When people don't have a good connection, they'll use more arm on these crunches. Then they'll end up to use more lats. And even when they'll use more pec to contract, they'll feel a good arm pump, but they won't feel that much in the pelvis because usually it's supported when in real life, your legs are in the air if you're on the floor or you're standing doing a leg raise, or your pelvis, you have to maneuver it in space. If you're a gymnast or if you're a diver or you're doing jumps in plyometric, that's where, again, if you only go to the gym once in a while and the machine is you could adjust the length of the lever arm to fit, and that's really hard for your height because you're way taller than I am. If I go with you at the gym and we do the crunch machine, if I lift the seat and it's still not moving accordingly to my spine. It's almost comparing like a Smith machine squat to a regular squat. The spine doesn't move. It's like stuck in one place, and that's not reality. Again, for the mom and pop that go to the gym twice a week, it's better than nothing. But for an athlete, I don't see any benefit. I see actually the opposite. It's kind of a waste of time because athletes, there's one thing they don't have. They don't have a lot of time. My work is to make the most in a very, very short time. Remember when we worked together with the figure skaters, we had them for 30 minutes twice a week. You're talking about Olympic champions. Imagine how much you need creativity to create these adaptations that on the ice, they'll feel good and that they are able to squeeze that in an hour a week. That's where it's, but that's reality of when you deal with a lot of sports, a lot of athletes.
Final question. What about men versus women? Because women carry much more of their total body weight in their lower extremities. Are there any differences in how you train abdominals for men versus women?
No, not really. But the only thing what we're finding is that because now it's getting out of style. But in my days, I'm born in 1961. Ladies like to have the high heels, and the high heels create a lot of anti-version of the pelvis. And I had a lot of women come in and see me, especially the fitness model, that from the side they were very lean, but the stomach was sticking out because of their pelvis was an anti-version, and many of them at what we call a twisted one side is more up and more forward than the other side, created by this harmonic feet. But we won't go there. But a lot of them, then we had to be targeting more of the sub-umbilical. But on the good news is that most women and girls, they have a better awareness of their body and space than men, most of them, unless the athlete that comes and see me is a gymnast. I see it when I'm training my Olympic mogul skiers with my hockey players. When we do abdominal drills, one command, they'll do it right. Some of my hockey players, multi-million dollar, it's going to take them more time to get that position. But also women tends to need a little more volume. They respond very good to higher volume because in the literature, if we talk about the metabolic reflex, how much you're able to do a high intensity cardiovascular exercise in time, women, they tend to be able to sustain higher level of tension, intensity exercise for more volume than males. When we do circuit training with different high level movement, a lot of my skiers, when they were training with the hockey players, I had to give them one more round compared to my guys. With all the markers, everything we used to measure, they had enough gas in the tank, way more than the guys, and the recovery was faster. But it depends on their sleep. It depends on their food. Depends on the hormones. Are they on medication? Are they taking birth control? And that's all. Most girls on birth control will tend to carry a lot more fat in the lower body because that's has to do with hormones. But again, it will not differ. I will only modify it depending on their sports.
Okay. Now you have a special course coming up soon. Can you tell us more about that?
Well, it's beyond physical prep. It's already out on Expertise 360. But on the 7th, that's going to be the subject. It's part of the course of almost like my old Test It, Fix It, showing a couple of tests how to help, but not only for athletes, for general population. You could test your own self very easily. And how to one part of the program that I will cover on the 7th of September will be on mainly abdominal training and how it correlates. But it's going to be a very practical. It's only an hour. The PDF will be there. I don't like to read slides too much. I like to show exercise. I'll have an athlete with me in my beautiful garage demonstrating throughout the exercise while I explain. For me, that's how I like to learn. And I think people, they get a better understanding of just listening to me talking instead of showing movements.
Okay, that was great. I appreciate you taking the time, Paul.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you.
Yeah, say, Paul, what everything you just did